Okay, so in the interest of time, again, I'm going to skip this slide for now. But it's on the subject of how you could possibly prove a lower bound for randomized communication complexity. And you know, you need to prove a lower bound on any sort of probability distribution over deterministic communication problems that solve protocols that solve a problem. And long story short, there's something called, the Minimax principle, which maybe I'll come back to if I have time. But it says that the randomized communication complexity of a problem can be viewed in an alternate way. And to understand this alternate way, we need to look at something called distributional communication complexity, which is a version of communication complexity where we do have random inputs. You know, always I've been stressing like, oh, in the randomized model, it's still like worst case input, and we're just randomizing over internal coin flips. But in distributional communication complexity, we're now going to actually consider probability distributions on inputs. So let mu denote a probability distribution on pairs, little x and y, like total inputs, x and y for Alice and Bob. And then d superscript mu of f, with also an epsilon, is the least cost of a deterministic protocol, pi, which has error at most epsilon under the input distribution. Okay, so now there's a fixed distribution on inputs, mu, and you're searching for deterministic communication protocols for Alice and Bob. And what you're hoping for, you know, they're going to have some maximum amount of communication, C as always, and you're hoping that they have small error, where now the error is with respect to choosing the input from this distribution mu. Okay, and so d superscript mu sub epsilon is the least number of bits you need to communicate in the best protocol, which achieves error at most epsilon when the inputs are drawn from the distribution mu. And why do we bring this up? There's this thing, consequence of the Minimax theorem, which says that the randomized communication complexity of a task F is equal to sort of like the worst possible distribution complexity. It's equal to what you get if you choose sort of like the quote unquote hardest possible probability distribution on input pairs, x, y for F, and you look at the deterministic cost under that, achieving error epsilon, under that distribution. Okay, so instead of considering like worst case inputs and randomized protocols, you consider deterministic inputs, deterministic protocols and a really hard input distribution. And this thing called Yau's Minimax principle, which follows from the von Neumann Minimax theorem, which basically follows from LP duality, Farkash lemma, says these two things are equal. And the reason we bring this up is because it's exactly the starting point you need to try to prove lower bounds on randomized communication complexity. And we use it because it's much easier to reason about a fixed deterministic protocol, which we know is like a tree and a matrix partition and so forth, than it is to reason about randomized protocols. So a consequence of the Yau's Minimax principle is that, let's say you want to show that the randomized complexity, communication cost of some function like the disjointness problem is at least C, then it's sufficient and also necessary to find some, to think really hard as the mathematical prover about a really hard distribution mu on inputs that you could give to Alice and Bob, and then show that for any deterministic protocol that uses fewer than C bits, it's going to have more than epsilon error on this hard distribution mu. So whatever your function is, like disjointness, you have to think of like some challenging randomized way to give two sets to Alice and Bob that is going to make them hard for them to solve disjointness with small error and deterministic protocols. So the last thing I want to show you in this lecture is an illustration of how this goes, but not for disjointness, but for the inner product mod 2 problem. I'm going to show that it requires linear communication, in fact, n over 2 minus 1 bits, with a randomized public coins protocol with error 1/4. And so we're going to use this Yao Minimax principle. And so it suffices to show the same lower bound for the distributional complexity for our favorite hard distribution. And it turns out the smart hard distribution to choose is actually not so smart. It's the uniform distribution. Alice and Bob just get uniformly random strings. That's nice. Like, that's actually the hard case for the inner product mod 2 communication task. So just to recall a few things about this problem, we're going to think about it in this way, where like Alice gets a bit string, which is either plus or minus 1 to the n, and Bob gets a subset of the inputs s, and their task is to compute this like Fourier character, which is like the product over the reals of the s bits of x. Okay, so Alice gets an x-bit string of plus or minus 1s. Bob gets a subset of the positions, and their task is to compute the product of the bits of x in these positions, which is either plus or minus 1. It's kind of the parity of the bits in those positions. The trouble is, Alice knows the string, Bob knows the set. And a couple of things we'll rely on, if you remember way back to the analysis of Boolean functions lecture, we have this notion of Fourier coefficients of a function f. It's probably bad that I used f here because it's not the communication problem. This is like a Boolean function, having n-bit strings to 1-bit strings. This Fourier coefficient has this formula. It's the expected value of f of x times chi sx. And we're also going to need to rely on this Parseval formula, which says that for a Boolean function f, the sum of the squares of the Fourier coefficients is 1. Okay, so the last couple of slides are going to give this proof. So we have our hard distribution, the uniform distribution. And now we want to show that we're going to fix any deterministic C-bit communicating protocol. And we're going to think of this protocol as, you know, converting an input pair, x and s, for Alice and Bob, to the protocol answer, the final guess for inner product mod 2 applied to x and s. Now, this protocol may sometimes give the wrong answer. But what we want to show is that if it's only communicating C bits, then in fact, there's a good chance it gives the wrong answer on the uniform distribution. So this deterministic protocol, pi, which communicates C bits, as we know it, partitions all possible input pairs, x and s, into 2 to the c, the mf, into 2 to the c combinatorial rectangles, which I'll call like script r sub I cross script s sub I. And so script r sub I is a collection of Alice inputs. It's a collection of strings. Script s sub I is a collection of Bob inputs. It's a collection of subsets of s, which is a little confusing, but it's a collection of subsets. And furthermore, this protocol, its leaves are, bits, which we're going to call plus or minus 1. And so it outputs the same value, let's call it z sub I, on every one of these combinatorial rectangles, script r I cross script si. Okay, so here's our task. What we want to show is if C is small, then this protocol has to make a large error, or error with high probability. Or to put it in the contrapositive, let's say this protocol gets the correct answer on 3/4 of possible inputs. Then we want to show that it must be communicating a lot of bits. Okay, so if this protocol pi, which effectively defines a matrix, mostly agrees with the communication matrix for inner product mod 2 under the uniform distribution, then the number of combinatorial rectangles, or C, has to be really large. In other words, if you take the inner product mod 2 communication matrix, which, spoiler alert, actually is the Hadamard matrix from that quantum lecture, or the analysis of Boolean functions lecture, not only can you not split it up into a small number of combinatorial rectangles that are all zeros or all ones, you can't even really do it in such a way that like each rectangle is like mostly zeros or mostly ones, where mostly means like at least 3/4. Okay, so what remains is a calculation, and I know I'm going a little over time here, so if you need to leave, I'm not offended, but I want to finish this calculation for this video. You can catch up with it later if you gotta go. It's just like 2 slides. Okay, so let's work under this assumption that this C-bit communication protocol agrees with the true answer of inner product mod 2 for at least 3/4 of input pairs x, s, x for Alice, s for Bob, when x and s are drawn uniformly. That's what this 3/4 is with respect to. So we deduce, I mean, just restating that really, that the expectation when x is random and s is random of the protocol's output and the true answer, it's going to be large. So remember, I'm using plus or minus 1 notation. So this is plus or minus 1. This is plus or minus 1. And when it's getting the right answer, you get either plus 1 times plus 1 or minus 1 times minus 1. So you get plus 1 when it's the right answer. And when pi is getting the wrong answer, you're getting minus 1. But since we're assuming you're getting the right answer with probability at least 3/4, we get 3/4 times plus 1 plus 1/4 times minus 1 in expectation. So we get at least a half. Okay, so this is just translating our assumption about the quality of pi into like some math. And now let's think about this protocol pi. We can also think of it as like a function, really, that maps a pair of inputs, x and s, into like this z output. And there's at most 2 to the c combinatorial rectangles. So we can write it as like a sum, this function as a sum, as I goes from 1 to 2 to the c, of the indicator that the input pair xs is in this ith combinatorial rectangle, well, times the answer zi that it gives, either plus or minus 1 on this rectangle. Now, this is a combinatorial rectangle, so to say that x comma s is in Ri cross Si is to say that x is in Ri and s is in Si. So this is a small but neat trick. We can replace this indicator with the product of 2 indicators. And I'm going to even think of this indicator as a function of x, which I'll call 1 sub Ri. And I think of this indicator as a function of the input capital S, the subset of bits that Bob gets, namely 1 sub script Si. So I'm going to plug that back up here and get that this line implies this line. Expectation of a random x and random s of this is just this you could put parentheses here. This whole thing in parentheses is pi xs. Okay, and its correlation with inner product mod 2 on xs is at least a half. Okay, now we'll do some like autopilot maneuvers. So we just put this inequality, put the half on the left, so it's over here. It's at most. So I'll bring the sum to the outside. So I have this sum over I going from 1 to 2 to the c, whoops, of zi times this expectation. And now I'll just say, look, this zi is either plus or minus 1. And so I can upper bound, zi times this expectation by the absolute value of the expectation. And now I can just upper bound this sum of 2 to the c expressions by their maximum. So I get that a half is at most 2 to the c, the number of combinatorial rectangles, times the maximum possible value of this expression. And this expression, if you think about it, it's known as the discrepancy of the inner product function on this combinatorial rectangle, Ri cross Si, under the uniform distribution. Okay, you pick x and s at random. You sort of use this indicator to check that they're in the combinatorial rectangle, Ri cross Si. And then you look at the inner product mod 2's value here, which is either plus or minus 1. So you're kind of measuring this is really the Hadamard matrix. You're measuring sort of the balance of plus or minus 1s, or the discrepancy of plus or minus 1s in this combinatorial rectangle, Ri cross Si. Okay, so what I claim is that each of these terms here in the maximum is at most a 2 to the minus n over 2. So it's really, really small, which is sort of saying that like every combinatorial rectangle in this inner product mod 2 matrix is very close to being balanced with plus or minus 1s. And therefore, just putting that together, this is at most 2 to the minus n over 2. I got half is less than or equal to 2 to the c times 2 to the minus n over 2. So taking log base 2, I get minus 1 is less than or equal to c minus n over 2. And that's what I was shooting for, that c is at least n over 2. Okay, minus 1. Okay, so this is really the last slide. The last thing I need to prove is this claim that this discrepancy quantity is super small. And we'll use analysis of Boolean functions for this. So this quantity, I'll now remember that inner product mod 2 applied to inputs x and s is nothing more than this Fourier character. It's the product of the s bits of x. Okay, so I'll just move the expectation over x to the inside. So we get expectation over s of this indicator that s is in Si times the expectation over x of the indicator of Ri times this Fourier monomial. And by definition, this is like, or basically by the most basic formula, this is the Fourier coefficient of the indicator function Ri on monomial set S. And now I'm going to use a very basic fact. The expectation of a random variable is at most the square root of its expectation squared. This is Cauchy-Schwarz. So I'm just going to upper bound this by the square root of the expectation of the square of the inside. So I just squared both things on the inside. This should say less than or equal to, because this quantity is either 0 or 1. This quantity is non-negative, so if we just drop this quantity, it can only make the quantity go up. And we'd be left with the expectation over S of this squared Fourier coefficient. Okay, and the expectation over S is really just 2 to the minus n times the sum over S. And pulling that out of the square root, we get this 2 to the minus n over 2 times the sum of the squares of the Fourier coefficients, which is actually, this is another little mistake, at most 1 by Parseval. I guess it's a mistake because it's a 0, 1 valued function rather than a plus or minus 1 valued function. But well, let me leave it at that since I'm running way over time. And that completes the proof of this claim. Okay, so in the end, we proved that the randomized communication complexity of the inner product mod 2 function is basically linear. It's basically n over 2. By showing that under the uniform distribution, any deterministic protocol that uses fewer than n over 2 bits has to have error at least a quarter. And you might ask, can we use the same technique to show this lower bound for the disjointness problem? But this exact same thing will not work, because you can easily show that for the uniform distribution on inputs, the disjointness problem for Alice and Bob is very easy. Because usually a random pair of sets is not disjoint, so they can basically just always output no and be right with very high probability. In fact, you cannot use any product distribution to get a good lower bound for disjointness. It's a theorem. This is not easy, but it's any product distribution where Alice's input is independent of Bob's input. It's not that hard for disjointness. It only requires about root n of bits of communication. And therefore, if you want to prove, this famous theorem about disjointness, that for randomized protocols, it needs a linear number of bits of communication, your hard distribution is actually going to be a non-product distribution. Alice's input and Bob's input are not going to be independent. So you can think about what that kind of distribution might look like. But as I mentioned earlier, the best proof of this fact actually relies on information theory, which will be the topic of our next lecture. Okay, let me stop the recording there since I went ridiculously over time. So anybody who stuck around, thank you. Sorry for going over time and making you, sorry to the other people for making you watch the end of the video. I'm going to stop the recording now. Well, actually, yeah, let me stop the recording now, and then I'll answer some more questions.